Welcome to Through the Eyes of She, Equity in Health, Education, Business, and Leadership for the African Woman in the 21st Century. Please utilize the chat and Q&A features on the side of your toolbar. Please use the Q&A feature to submit any questions for the panelists. This session is being recorded. Thank you.
Hello, welcome back from your break. We hope you enjoyed the Tech Women in Health, Nigeria is Joining the Game session. My name is Chantal Rodriguez. I'm the Associate Dean of the David Geffen School of Drama at Yale, and I'm very grateful to be here with you today. And I'd like to thank the conference organizers for inviting me to welcome you to this next panel. Before I do that, I just want to give a little bit of a shameless plug to the David Geffen School of Drama at Yale. We are a graduate training program, and we train in all disciplines of the theater. And thanks to a historic donation from the David Geffen Foundation, this year we are proud to be a tuition-free school. And we encourage you to learn more about the school. You may be most familiar with some of our illustrious graduates, which include the amazing Lupita Nyong'o and other amazing artists across all genres of theater making. Specific to the themes of this conference, I also just wanted to shout out that our acting program currently has an unprecedented amount of students of Nigerian descent who are making amazing work. And this weekend at the Yale Cabaret, you can catch Abigail Onwunali's most recent theatrical endeavor, which is called Number 4, and it's available at the Yale Cabaret. You could also visit them online, and their plays are available streaming as well. So I'm going to move along to the reason why you're all here is to listen to our wonderful panelists. Next up on this panel, which is called In Conversation, Creating Access and Equity in Media, Art, and Culture. This session is going to be a wonderful conversation with two Yale World Fellows who work in media, and they are Akisa Omulepu and Viola Alabi, excuse me. Akisa Omulepu is an Emmy-nominated documentarian, director, and producer. She is the founder and CEO of Emerge Omnimedia, whose mission is to create and tell stories that explore, investigate, and celebrate the experiences of people from the African diaspora. Viola Alabi is an African media expert with over 25 years of local and global media experience, and she is currently the CEO at Viola Alabi Media Consulting, a content creation based in Nigeria, working across the world in broadcast, telecommunications, and digital industries. As a reminder, throughout the conversation, feel free to post your questions using the Q&A function in the webinar, and our moderator, Nora, will deliver these during or after the session. So I'm going to hand it over to Akisa now and invite you to enjoy this wonderful conversation.
Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. I'm here with the lovely and talented Viola Alabi, a media powerhouse based in Lagos. She's executive producer of Lara and the Beat, amongst other many projects. It's now streaming on Netflix. And we're gonna have a conversation about how women are reshaping and defining narratives in media, art, and culture. So welcome, Viola.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to see you again, Akisa, after so many years. So I'm excited.
Viola and I met many years ago. I don't know if Viola remembers this, in Accra, Ghana, at the
African Leadership Network. So it was an amazing networking place for Africans and diasporans, and they still do it. Yes, they still do it in different ways, and it's transitioned now. But the idea was, how do you get Africans to network and meet each other in the same way that organizations like the World Economic Forum does it? And it was really, at that time, there was so much young energy on the continent. It feels like there's a new transition of young energy, and I remember us just having an amazing conversation at that event.
It was fantastic. At that time, you were at DSTV, if I remember correctly.
I was.
So before we get to DSTV, I'd like to get all of our audience up to speed about who you are and all the wonderful things you've done and how did you get to this really pivotal moment in your professional career. So Viola Alabi, tell me a little bit about yourself.
So as you said, my name is Viola Alabi. I was born actually in Chicago, raised in Chicago. During a few years in between, we migrated to Nigeria and actually lived in Nigeria for a few years and then migrated back. And then at that time we moved to Ohio. And that's sort of how I got into the Ohio life and then went to school in Cincinnati. And really after UC, University of Cincinnati, really felt really lost and really trying to figure out what to do next. I had really started university with this idea of being pre-med and then pre-pharmacy, and very quickly realized I didn't want to do any of those things, from internships and then sort of like, what do I do next? And that led me into marketing, led me to go on a traineeship to South Korea. And then after my traineeship, I ended up actually living in Korea for another year teaching English because there was nothing else to do if I was going to stay in Korea, and got a job teaching English at a company. And so I would teach English in the morning to executives and then come back in the evening after work. And through that relationship, developed a really critical relationship with the Daewoo company, which is a conglomerate. And they were going to be launching their automotive in America. And they were looking for young people to work on that marketing campaign because the idea was they were looking for first-time car buyers, which was really targeted towards young people. And so I ended up getting this great job, came back to the States, moved back to Chicago, Chi-Town, and I was I was part of the Midwest team. We were looking for young ambassadors, so doing a lot of campus marketing. And that actually led me into another great marketing job, which was for an early stage startup online bookstore. And marketing became I started to see the power of marketing when we started to create television commercials. So I came to media through television commercials for companies that I was working for. And being on set, working with the agency, looking at how talent was managed and interacting with talent, and really feeling like this was a long day that I couldn't figure it out. And then seeing the final product, it was like magic to me. It was like you could spend all day on set, nothing feels right, nothing feels like it's going well. And then this final product, selling something or communicating a message. And that's how I came to media. So I came to media through marketing. And I just kept on feeling this powerful medium, and I wanted to do more. I wanted to see how it could be pushed more, how you can use it more. And so when I was working for this online university textbook site, I really started to get into more education, really more helpful tips, how students can use our products, how students can use our site, and really trying to develop a place where people can come to. And so for me, once again, I started to see the power of education, the power of communication through media. And then through a bunch of other jobs in between marketing jobs, I ended up at a place that I felt extremely lucky and fortunate to be at, and that was Sesame Street, part of the PBS family. And there's something so powerful at working at Sesame Street because it is in the purest form of media education. It is the earliest years of exposure to media, and it's research driven. And those were some of the things that I loved about it. And so that's sort of my journey into media, and part of my introduction. So I'm going to pause here, Akisa, so that we can also sort of get some of yours and we can sort of have an interaction.
That is fantastic. I love that narrative because we have a lot of parallels. I came to media through education as well. My undergraduate degree is in economics from Lincoln University. Of course, that's the home of Nnamdi Azikiwe. Your first prime minister actually went to school with two of his sons, Uwakwe and Moloko Azikiwe, both went to Lincoln with me. And my first job out of college was at JP Morgan as a business analyst. And like you, I was, typical immigrant child. I was going to be like in business and engineering and something quote unquote credible to the parents. But I was always drawn to media, art, and culture. So I eventually migrated there. But before I got there, I was a math teacher. I left JP Morgan because it wasn't my story. And after many years though, because you have to, put in your time, you can't just up and quit. It would have been appalling to my parents. And I became a math teacher and a math professor. And I still love kids. They give me great vitality and energy. Although I don't have any of my own, I still love kids and I love being around them. And eventually that pull of media and storytelling pulled me back. I went back to school, got a master's in journalism at Columbia, and began producing news for NBC and CNBC. At some point, I left NBC and I moved to Nairobi. I had lived there briefly as a child, but I went back as an adult and was a foreign correspondent, and that's where I started my production company. And through my connections at NBC, I was a part of the production team for NBC Nightly News that covered the Westgate Mall terror attack. Amongst many stories, I had a short-lived TV show on NTV in Nairobi that covered arts and culture. It was called Close Up Africa. And that's at that moment, I really kind of rededicated myself to and recommitted myself to telling stories that were meaningful to me. And that's how I kind of really sunk my teeth into media full-fledged. And I moved back to the States after 8 years of living in Nairobi. And this is an additional shared connection. We were both a part of the Yale World Fellows Program. And that moment was so substantive for me because I really needed a time to step back and reflect in kind of this wonderful bubble to reassess the path forward. While I was there, I did a documentary short.
I've applied to Radford University, Southern Connecticut State University, and Quinnipiac University. I've been accepted to all three of those. At first, I thought that getting accepted into college would just be like, oh, whatever, but when I got my acceptance letters, it made me really happy. It showed that a school actually wanted me to come be a student there.
It had a limited engagement here at a theater in New York City. And, you evolve. And I realized that telling narratives about women, about young girls is really important to me. And that's kind of the path that led me there. And another parallel, I'm hearing our stories. I am another PBS person, just like you. Not recently, I did a few documentary shorts. One documentary short, A Dream Deferred, The Broken Promise of New York City Public Housing, aired on PBS about 2 years ago, was nominated for 2 Emmys. And this past year, I was the first Black woman, which is a crazy statement, to direct great performances in the show's nearly 50-year history. So PBS is a platform where education and media collide. Which I find very, very fascinating. And like you, Lara and the Beat, I think we have a clip of that, and we're going to cut to a clip of that so people can get up to speed.
We're rich. Wow, ladies, today is the day. What? Today's going to propose.
Can we not share this moment with your social media followers?
Excuse me, you're going to need them one day. All 3 million of them.
Spa beauty date.
I can't make it. We have a board meeting in the office tomorrow.
As a result of Giwa Media's refusal to perform their civic responsibility, a warrant of restraint on the building and everything inside it has been obtained by the Lagos State Internal Revenue Service. We would like everyone in this building to vacate it with immediate effect.
God has a plan for all of us, and you and your sister have a place in that plan.
So Lara and the Beat was this fantastic movie. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you decided to take on this project?
Sure. And congratulations once again on your nominations. It's always so amazing when these things happen and this recognition. So I really hats off and really can't wait to dig into some of these projects. So after many years at Sesame Street, I was extremely fortunate to be working on, I started out at Sesame Street in marketing and sponsorship. And then I moved into international co-productions, which is basically you take the Sesame Street model, you travel around the world, you work with producers and educators and stakeholders to do a local version. And so in doing that, ended up working on our South African productions, doing feasibility studies in like 8 countries in Africa. And that really led me to DSTV. I started talking to them to see if they could be a partner. They broached an idea of a job, and that job would require moving. And then the CEO, as soon as she said it, she said, "But I mean, you're not going to leave New York, are you?" And I said, "Well, let's talk more." And so that's how I actually ended up at DSTV. And what really drew me to that job is actually why I made Lara and the Beat, which is that it was really important for DSTV at that time to be seen as an African brand and an African company. It at that time had a lot of Hollywood content that was doing really well, but there wasn't a rich collection of African stories and African content. And so my job was to really come in, since I had done all this localization of an American brand, to sort of see how we can do monetization, commercialization of an African brand. And that sort of took us to how do we develop Nollywood into a more commercial, exhibition and distribution product. And so that's why we started to create, I think we created 7 Africa Magic channels, indigenous language channels. We created an award ceremony where people could be recognized and celebrated for their creativity so that we can continue to fill the pipeline. We created role models. We created so many different things. But the really important thing for us was, how do we take this thing that people are looking down on? How do we build it? How do we train? How do we change the narrative about how even Africans saw themselves? And you could even see it. You could see the conversation on Twitter, how it changed. I remember in the beginning when we first started doing this, people would say, watching Africa Magic burnt brain cells, to the point now where it's a destination. I mean, people go there to watch, to be refreshed, to be refilled and refueled. And also people go there as a source of a place to learn about their culture. And these were all the targets and the goals we had at the beginning. But when I left because I felt like it was time to also change and do something else. And so in the middle of changing, I worked for another company that wanted to do more and set up their own studio and do partnerships. We tried that, it didn't work. But in the meantime, there were 2 stories that came to me. One was Banana Island Ghost and Lara and the Beat. And Lara and the Beat was so important to me because I have a sister, we have such a close relationship. But what happens a lot of times in Nollywood stories, I didn't feel like there was the female bonds and female friendships and female relationships were properly explored, in a sense that you and your sister can have a fight now, but then be friends, you'll always have each other's back. There seemed to be a lot of antagonistic relationships in African cinema when it came to women, and I really didn't want that. I wanted us to start to change that narrative. I wanted to create more positive role models for women. This sort of like real, I mean, really when I thought about this story, I really wanted people to watch it years from now, and really that it reminded them of their relationship with their sisters or with their best friends. I mean, the 2 sisters were standing really for best friends, for female relationship, and how these 2 women were very different, but at the same time, very similar. And their ups and downs and the challenges women face and how they can face them together. And so it was really important to me that these 2 women be believable as sisters, but that they also be on their own journeys, their separate journeys, but having to come together to solve this big problem. And so the minute that I started thinking about, and then the story just never left me. And it was like I had to make it so that I could be free. So I did it so that I could be free. and put it out in the world. And I think that's the thing about creating, about being a creative, at the same time about being a businesswoman, is constantly balancing that, because there's sometimes where your creative energy doesn't allow a story to leave you, but you might, when you do the financial analysis, it might just not make sense from a financial perspective. So you constantly have to be balancing between what is my brain telling me and what is my heart telling me. And I think that's the beautiful thing about the space we're in, because arts, culture, media, it is a business, but at the same time, it has this power to shift people, to shift narratives, to tap people in an emotional way that they themselves aren't even expecting to happen. And so those are the reasons why I felt Lara and the Beat was really important.
That was fantastic. So now tell me, as we know, content is queen instead of king. How do we help other women create content and have access to create content in the film and TV and art space?
So one of the things that I find to be such a shifting, the biggest shift in my own worldview has been actually about the possibilities that technology allows us to do now, the things that it allows us to do now. So for example, what we're doing today, once again, 10 years, it would have been like just so difficult to do. We're able to achieve this conversation with very low tech, very, not that much inconvenience. Which is why I think that we're in such an amazing space today when it comes to access, to creating, to telling stories, to shifting narratives. And if you look at someone like Issa Rae, how she started her career, really putting content out there wherever she could get it to be. So once again, like you said, content is queen, distribution is king. So putting this out on different platforms to be discovered. And and we can all agree that today she is queening all the way. And so that to me, and that's also something I was challenged on very early in my career here on the continent. There were some young people, we were having a forum, and they said they don't feel like, and it was a woman, they said they don't feel like there's a space for them. And I said, let's create that space for you. And today, some of those women have gone on to have some of the most popular blogs on the continent. Some of them have gone on to write their own novels. Some of them are some of the biggest creators on YouTube. And so for me, what's exciting is really finding the stories you want to tell and starting to tell those stories with everything you have now. That is actually how you transition from telling your stories with your phone today to telling those stories on the big screen. And I think that access will come with good stories and good storytelling. But that still doesn't mean that you shouldn't find the right people to partner with, the right mentors to guide you. I mean, there are 2 projects right now I'm EPing on, and really mainly because they're young, they're female writer directors, or they're fully female teams. They stayed with me, they kept me updated on these projects, and I said, sure, I'll jump on as an EP. So I think that those relationships are important, to continue to cultivate those relationships as a woman, really reach out and network. I mean, one of the things I've also done now is really pivoting more into technology. So sort of this media technology play that I'm doing. And I find that I'm amazed at how many people reach out to connect with me from a technology perspective. And the highest percentage of those people are male. So really, I think, as women, as young women, continue to reach out and connect with people. You don't have to have an immediate ask. It could just be that I'm connecting with you. I love your work. I saw your work. If I ever want to do something, I'll love to talk to you about it. Once again, with technology, we're able to have quick calls, 30-minute calls, 15-minute calls that people can book with you. And some of them are just sort of part of office hours. So find the people that are offering office hours, connect with them, tell them what narratives you're trying to shift. If people feel that your story is going to be impactful and make an impact, start to cultivate those relationships now, but also start to tell those stories in any form that is available to you.
Absolutely. As you were talking, it came to mind how important it is also to be a master of your craft. So when I first started out, I I one-man banded and often still one-man band a lot of my stories, meaning I shoot it, I edit it, I present it, and that also allowed me the facility of learning how to edit and of course having an eye of what to shoot. Can you tell me about why it's so critical, yeah, and no matter which profession, but specifically in media, why it's so critical to be in a state of constant learning as when it comes to your craft? You may not become an editor or you may not become a DP or shooter, but you still have to have a facility and a deeper understanding of how all those interplay. What would you recommend for young people who want to be storytellers?
So, I mean, one of the things is there's still a lot of opportunities for apprenticeship. I think internships are great, really anything where you can understudy people, understudy experts. I remember my first days on a set, being the marketing manager and just really being confused and not understanding anything that was happening. And then really saying I wanted to understand more, really asking a lot of questions and really understudying people. And it wasn't because I wanted to shoot. I mean, that wasn't part of it. I just wanted to understand the process so that I could actually know what I was looking for. And then when people would send me tape to say, oh, we need you to give us notes. I remember the first time someone sent me tapes to give notes, I was like, no, what does that mean? What do I do? What do I say? And I contacted a friend who was a producer at the time. I said, look, they've sent me these things. I need to give notes. What does that even mean? And so really being ready to ask questions, being ready to having trusted people in the profession, find trusted people that you can sort of, attach yourself to, really sort of toggle. And then the more you learn, the more you find that you actually have to learn more. And I think that it's really important. I mean, now when people show me tape, I'm always like, look at this. Well, you didn't frame it this way. You didn't frame it that way. You should have done this. And it just comes so natural now. And people, I mean, especially junior producers are like, how did you see that? But it's just from years of watching tape, years of giving notes, years of being part of the process and part of the creative process. So it's not always about you having to do everything, but it's about you understanding enough of what people are doing that you can add value. So you really should think about it as, how do I add value to every part of this process? And I think it makes you a powerful storyteller. It makes your journey, it makes people want to be part of your journey because people feel like you're always going to add value to what they're doing. And in the beginning, you might feel like you're taking, but always be conscious of also how to give. You can actually ask people, thank you so much. You really helped me. How can I give back? And be conscious about asking. Otherwise, people will feel like it's not a two-way street. But I think, don't underestimate the power of internships. I think that was something that I really felt bad for people about when we weren't doing in person, and saying, I wonder how people are learning, especially in the workplace now that everything is virtual or hybrid. And so wherever you can take opportunities to be around people that are creating, that are telling stories, especially stories that mean something to you, really try to offer your service, try to be part of those stories. The more you're a part of great stories, the more people are going to bring you on to great projects.
That's fantastic. So the title of this conference that we're a part of, the focus is on women and women leaders. And I think it's really important. In the projects that I've been working on, I try my best to hire as many women in a variety of capacities, because the reality is it's still a very male-dominated industry. At least in the States. I can't say for Nigeria, I can't say for Nollywood, but here in New York and the States, it's still very male dominated. So with that in mind, when you think about it, it's often people get hired based on who you know. How do we break that model and expand our abilities to bring in more people into an industry that is sorely in need of more women?
So we in Nollywood and across Africa, there are just certain things, certain elements of the industry that is still male dominated. So much more, if you look at the engineering part of the industry, it's still much, male dominated.
Graduate student.
Very rarely would you meet a lighting or gaffer that's a female. I mean, I think, and even editing. I mean, for me, I love working with female editors. I love working with great editors, but I also feel like there's sometimes a special touch, and we still need to train more women. So I think that in as much as we have business leaders that have transitioned into Nollywood, and so we have a lot of leadership at the EP level and the producer level, and even directly, we have more and more female directors now. But what you find is when it comes to crew, it is still extremely, there's some gender roles that are still very typical. And I think that those are some of the things we need to break. But also to like, the challenge about this industry is it is a people industry. I think there have been so many different platforms that try to decentralize that, but it is still about vouching for people. It is still about, and the reason why is because it's an industry that time is money. And when you only have 20 days to shoot something, or you only have 40 days to shoot something, it's really hard for people to take a chance on new people, which is why it's so important for people to establish themselves through working with people, interning with people, getting on as many sets as you can. Let people know that you're someone that adds value and can do more than one thing. People love it that if you're on their set, you are a problem solver. Nobody wants people that come on their set and say, no, people like problem solvers. So really start to, I see you smiling because I know you know what that feels like when someone is on your set and they can just make problems go away. This is what producers want. This is what directors want. And so in as much as possible that you can learn those things and you can do those things, people are going to gravitate towards you. There are a few female producers here in Nollywood that if you're doing anything, their names always come to the top. But some of those people, I remember them when they started out in the industry, and they would just make themselves known and available. And I remember a couple of them calling me from time to time saying, I've been offered an associate producer, but it really looks like I'm doing more of a producer's job. How do I have that conversation around the right credit to ask for? And how can you, and really coaching people through that. I've had people call me saying, look, they've offered me a supporting role plus associate producer. Should I take it? I really don't want to do this. I don't want to do, and sometimes, I tell young women, take it. You're building this portfolio. And now today, she's traveling all over the world producing for some of the biggest platforms. But I remember those conversations and coaching through those conversations. So really try to find people that are on your personal board of directors that can help you make sure you don't say no to the right opportunities. Because it's very easy sometimes to feel like, I don't know how to have this conversation, that I don't feel like I'm being fairly treated. And sometimes it's just a conversation. The producer it might be an oversight that they started out thinking of you as an associate producer, but now you're really more like a second producer on the project. And it just could mean a conversation. And the person just might be so busy in the weeds that they're not thinking about having that conversation. And so what you don't want to do is sort of get into a place where you're not having that conversation, but you're also displeased, and that affects your performance. And so it's really important to find people to coach you through some of these conversations, to even give you conversation starters. How do you approach these difficult conversations? But part of being seen, being heard, and adding value is to have difficult conversations. Because sometimes people are like, I'm so glad you called me on that. They might not like it, but sometimes people are like, oh, thanks, we should really change that. And I think those are the things that you need to do to be seen, and your presence to be felt on a project.
We're in this COVID bubble reality, and I think we'll be here probably for another year. Unfortunately, how do we navigate ourselves? How do we navigate and still create moments of access and connection when we are still in this virtual world?
So one of the things I have found is that I am actually more accessible because of COVID, and also technology. So I have a couple of days a week that I do office hours. It's very easy to schedule. I send people a Calendly. I mean, it's a block. I mean, I do mentoring sessions. I work with the Founders Institute. I find that because I'm not spending so much time getting to places, the time that I live in Lagos. So, I mean, what I thought about was there are about 2-3 hours that I spend in commuting. And if I don't have to spend that time anymore, I can donate that time to mentoring. So actually, I find that as we're in this world, and also too, I have more time to do introductions. I tell people, be very clear about your ask. So I feel like it's actually, there's sort of an efficiency button that's also been pressed, because it's very clear what you need from me. You need 30 minutes from me. I know I'm going to be in a place. I don't have to leave my house for a quick coffee. I mean, so I do think that we should take advantage of the accessibility of people actually during this time. I found that during the difficult lockdowns, I was able to have more conversations with people that I couldn't have reached under normal circumstances, or I would have had to get on a plane to talk to them. I was shocked when one of my mentors, who I literally have to chase around the world if I ever need to see him, we had like 2 Zoom calls during lockdown, in between him doing other things. And so I think that these are really good times to also take advantage, but be very upfront and honest about what you want from someone. If it's 20 minutes, really in that 20 minutes, make sure that you utilize the time very well, so that they will schedule another follow-up call. But I think that there's so many opportunities for us to connect during this time. And we're going to be in this bubble for a while. So let's all find ways to reach out to people, network, really connect with some mentors, and really and always ask people for an introduction. If you don't have access to someone, but you really want to talk to someone, find someone in their network that can introduce you, that you might have a mutual connection with. This is the time, and let's use it well.
Yes, indeed. And that is a perfect way to wrap up our conversation. My final thought, and you can share yours as well, is that the world is more interconnected, especially now. And as it relates to how women can reshape the narrative, this is a moment where we can dig deeper into our connections and help each other even further to help achieve whatever dream that we're striving to. Do you have any final thoughts as it relates to how women can collaborate?
Yes, and I believe, one of the things I'm finding is because of the way women connect, women collaborate, and women network, technology has actually been so much more helpful with some of the groups I'm in. Some of the groups I'm in, people really drop a name in and say, does anyone know this person? Can I get an introduction? And so I feel like actually technology is a way to support us in the way that we connect as women, because and this is actually perfect for, there were parts of the lockdown that I just loved, because I was like, I don't have to go out, but I can still talk to people. I can still connect with people.
I don't have to sit in traffic.
Yes. And I think that's the thing about women. A lot of women are introvert extroverts. And so they have introvert moments and extrovert moments. And I think that we really need to capitalize on these opportunities we have to connect with people where they are. So there are people on LinkedIn. That's always going to be a business connection. There are people on Twitter that always is also going to be a mix of a business connection. Instagram, you know that you're personally connecting with this person, and so is Facebook. So really understand these points of connection and use them very well. But I think that this is a perfect time for women to connect, because there's no intimidation, there's no strange environment to be in, there are no strangers. So I totally love this part of connecting as women, and I love that we're using so many networks and so many social connections using technology. So please, let's start to use this and harness the power of technology, and make sure this time really works for women and elevates all of us so that we can all rise together.
And that is a beautiful way to end this conversation. I'd like to thank you, Viola Alabi, all the way in Lagos, for joining us here. And I'd like to thank the audience for participating. And the conference continues with the next discussion. Thank you so much, Viola.
Thank you. Thank you, Yale. Thank you for a great experience. Yale World Fellows 2014.
Yale World Fellows 2015. Keep it going. Thanks again.
Bye.
All right. A reminder to our audience members that if you have any questions, to put them in the Q&A and they'll be funneled to our speaker. Akisa, thank you so much for letting us listen into that conversation. That's clearly a conversation between colleagues and friends who are both in the media space. And just to start us off, I do have a couple questions before I lean into what the questions from the audience are. I thought it was interesting that both you and Viola ended up in media, not as a first choice, right? So you talked about being at JP Morgan, and she had, pharmacy and medical school on her mind. And so I wonder if you could start there by talking to the children of African immigrants in the diaspora, but also Africans on the continent who don't think that media or content creation is a viable option. And what would you say about, the need to create space if they don't see themselves reflected, as Viola kind of signaled to, and even just the roles that they can play that are not typically played by women or African women. And my second question, do you want to answer that first?
Let's do it. There's a lot to unpack there. Hi, Nora. Thanks for having me. And also thanks to Christine and the entire team over at Yale for making this happen. I know that's a lot of work goes behind the scenes. So thank you so much. Viola and I, yes, we are colleagues. As I said, we met many years ago in Accra, Ghana at ALN, African Leadership Network. And as your question was, talking about going into media as a second career. Mm-hmm. I think that speaks to the reality that we can always reinvent ourselves. We can pivot, you can change your mind, you can rethink something. You don't have to be stuck with one particular pathway if you see yourself doing something else. And Viola did start in business. I started in business too. My undergrad's in economics. So although I still love math, doesn't mean I have to deal with math for the rest of my life. You can do many things. We're multifaceted people. So I did make a pivot in my 30s to media. And for me, it was a natural pivot because I feel that media is a form of education. So it wasn't a hard pivot, and especially good media is a form of education. So it made sense for me at the time.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are glad to hear that.
But then as it relates to, being a first generation American, my dad was Kenyan, my mom was from Panama. And so, but I'm a native New Yorker. And I think the beauty of that is that we first generation kids or, recent immigrant kids, we can straddle both worlds. You don't have to pick. I think we're often programmed for decisions to be binary. It doesn't have to be. We can occupy and exist in multiple planes, and that's okay. You can, be with your family and be very Caribbean or very African, or you can be in the streets and be very American. You don't have to decide. You can be all of those things. You can occupy all of those spaces. And actually that gives you multiple lenses to interpret and to create new worlds for yourself if you're a storyteller or whatever profession you work in. So for young people who have parents who are saying doctor, engineer, lawyer, that's cool too. But if you choose a path that may not be initially socially acceptable, that's okay too, but you just know that you'll just have to work very hard.
Yeah, and speaking about straddling two worlds and occupying two spaces at once, part of your conversation was also around, being African women who are interested and passionate about telling stories about African women, but also being African women in an industry that's dominated by men. And so I wonder what that dichotomy does for you in your storytelling and in your craft, whether it presents frustrations, and if it does, what are those frustrations, or how does it make you move within that world?
Well, what you think about expands. So, I choose to focus on what matters to me. So the world, this industry, I wouldn't say will always be, but the framework we're under in this world right now, it tends to be very male dominated, and it is what it is. But I think you have a choice in what you choose to focus on. So how it informs me, I choose to focus on collaborating with like-minded people. And for me, that's how my world expands. I make a choice, I'm going to collaborate with like-minded people. So with that said, people will come to you who are supposed to be in your world. And I'm very fortunate to, know and collaborate with a lot of amazing and brilliant women. And there are many, many more that I have yet to meet and work with. So I think where your energy thinks, that's where it will flow.
Yeah, and just to go off of a comment that came from our address this morning, our keynote address by Dr. Amina Gharib Fakim, she mentioned that there's this movement of women into, certain industries in mass, right? So the biological sciences, there's a huge enrollment in colleges by women, but when it comes to moving up in the industry, the more you get to the top, there's less women. And so I wonder if you can see any similar trends within the media industry. Are there bottlenecks where women can't seem to get through? How do you navigate those?
Well, I think there will always be, barriers and, obstacles, and that's a part of everyone's life's journey. And no one is exempt from that reality. I think it speaks to the need to create your own path when that happens. And there will still be bottlenecks and barriers. It doesn't matter who you are. It's a part of the human experience to experience some form of resistance. For me, I've chosen to walk my own path. I definitely did corporate media for some time, and corporate media has its place and it's necessary, but it's not the only path. And you can create a path that makes sense for you as well. It could be some kind of hybrid situation. But the reality is I choose to operate with the idea of abundance, that there is enough for everybody. And everyone's story is valid, to to quote the fantastic Lupita Nyong'o. Everyone's story is valid. Right. And if you have a story that is within you, then you must persevere. It will not be easy. Let's be super clear. But it's valid and worthy of being told.
I'm switching now to a question that's from the audience. There was a theme of presenting oneself, of not being afraid to pitch oneself, issues that can seem overwhelming for women and especially young women from an African culture. Can you please comment and or give suggestions to the audience of women and young listeners in particular?
Suggestions for what, please? I'm sorry.
Can you give suggestions to young women in particular when issues can seem overwhelming, and then for how can they not be afraid to pitch themselves? How can they present themselves if they have an idea?
Well, again, I want to be clear. Everyone, this is a part of, the human experience. Everyone at some point in their life will feel overwhelmed or uncertain. And, but I also hold to the idea that that thing that causes you a little like, agita, is probably the thing you need to be walking towards. And not skirt any kind of fear or not dance around. You actually have to walk through it to strengthen you. So how do I get through? And let's be clear, like I am in the middle of a project that gives me trepidation. Let me be really clear, but I know it's a part of the process, and I just know I have to sit with this, angst and walk through it. It never goes away. But how do I get through it? Everyone is different. I think that you just have to really work through it. Like right now, I'm in the middle of a really difficult pitch deck that is, I've been, procrastinating for forever on it. I'm being very honest, but I am still, every day, I still plow at it and try bit by bit to chip at it, chip away at it. So how do you get through? You get through the work. You can't skirt doing the work. And it doesn't mean that every day I'm super productive, but every day I'm definitely chipping at it. And so the work is your balm, it's your salvation. It's how you build that muscle to persevere for the next hill that will inevitably come.
Yeah, and the next question from the audience is, what role do you see Africans playing in shaping the stories that come out of Africa?
Well,
right, like
that's central. It's
right.
It's us. We are. If we're telling our stories, we have to be at the center of those stories in every capacity. We have to be at the center, in front of the camera, behind the camera. We have to be a part of that narrative fully. And there's just no way around it. I think it's really important that we bring our perspectives. And also it's really important that we have, we're not a monolithic people. That's important to be said as well. And we have to honor the fact that although we may all be of African descent, we all are part of the diaspora in some capacity, all of our stories and all of their multifacetedness, if that's a word, needs to be expressed. Someone from, I have a shared history, of course, being a child of the diaspora, but each perspective needs to be expressed.
And as we get to our last question here, I wonder if you have any closing thoughts, but also with the theme of this conference being equity, if you could make a wish list and you wanted to see something change in your industry, in your field, in your content creation, what would it be to bring about equity at a faster pace or at a greater scale?
I'll speak from my vantage point, and I think maybe a lot for small business owners, access to capital continues to be a challenge. Access is a challenge, but it's not an impossible barrier. I think, as Viola has said, we have to find ways of reaching out to each other, because I think the barrier exists, but the answer is already within us, within our networks, within our connections to get through those barriers. I choose to think that it's all possible. It's going to be a lot of work, but if I would change anything in terms of access and equity, I would, access. Access is access for me as it relates to distribution and to access to capital is a perpetual uphill battle for sure.
Thank you for that, Akisa. Thank you to you and Viola for letting us listen into that very interesting conversation. I'd
like to add one thing. I know we're wrapping up in 1 second. I think, this is a shameless plug for Yale, although my graduate degree is not at Yale. I was there for a year for the fellowship. And one thing I do recommend for all creatives and for all people is that stillness and rest are also part of the equation. And we may be programmed to work. That's critical, will always be, but it's also equally important to find moments of rest and stillness to allow more creativity and opportunities to flow. So taking care of oneself is also a critical part of the equation, no matter what you do.
I couldn't say it better. And on that note, we'll close and thank everyone for joining us for this panel session. If you haven't so already, please fill out the survey in the link. It should be to the right of your screen. And we will be at the next session, the closing session with Teresa Shaheen in the next 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.